What's going on, everybody? We are live here on the Angle of Pursuit YouTube. We can kind of jibber jab for a little bit before jumping in, just to let anybody who wants to come hang out come join the show. Uh, so my hope was that I would be able. So I'm doing a Superflex Dynasty startup right now, and I was really hopeful that I was going to be on the clock again because it felt like it was coming up to my turn, but we still have a ways to go. But I just want to get your kind of feedback on how I've done so far. So
This is the one that you have the turn pick, right, at 112.
yeah, so I started 112, 201,
Great
and
start, by the way.
let's just so I started Joe Mixon, Dak Prescott. I'm pretty happy with that.
What quarterback was Prescott off the board?
So that's what I'm. So Lamar and Mahomes went 1-2. And then Kyler was picked 7 overall, so he's the third. Deshaun Watson was the fourth quarterback at 109, and I took Dak at 201.
And I think that's a steal. I like Deshaun Watson, but I just don't know what direction that team is going and the amount of hits he's taken over the beginning of his career. Like, who knows what we're going to be able to see out of him as he gets older.
Yeah, I feel like Dak's lock and loaded with all these different weapons that they keep adding, and all these receivers, and he still has Zeke to kind of help him out. But yeah, I'm looking at a guy that continually ends up in the top 5. Obviously, in redraft leagues, continually drafted outside the top 15, which I'll never get. But yeah, it was interesting, and obviously super flex. So quarterbacks came flying off the board. And obviously getting Joe Mixon. Let's see, Joe Mixon. Let's see, McCaffrey, Barkley, Zeke, Dalvin, and then Kamara. So what's that? He was like RB6. Josh Jacobs went after him. Miles Sanders went after him. I don't know. It's like I want to be optimistic about what Joe Burrow can be in that offense, and if that offense gets rolling like it has the potential, Joe Mixon could see a lot more upside, and he's still so young. But now kind of looking back at it, I do wonder if I would have gone Josh Jacobs or Miles Sanders over him. My affinity for Miles Sanders.
That's an interesting question, but I mean, when you're looking at those 3 guys in particular, like Josh Jacobs, we really don't know what kind of production we're going to see out of him as a receiver. They say they're more committed to that. We didn't really see him at Alabama get tons of looks. I mean, he didn't really start, so who knows? And then, Dalvin Cook, he's got competition with Alexander Madison. How long he already has a major injury. And Joe Mixon, like we talked about, like how quickly the narrative has changed with him. Like his value has skyrocketed with the drafting of Burrow, T. Higgins. They're showing a commitment to making a high-powered offense. And like I had been saying, if they could get Mixon happy, sign him to a long-term deal, we're looking at a guy that's going to be a consistent top 8, top 7 guy, like hands down going forward.
And Dynasty is hilarious too, because right after the draft, anytime there's a Dynasty startup, rookies always go a round or 2 higher than they probably should. Clyde Edwards-Helaire went 210. Jonathan Taylor went 211. They went before George Kittle, Derrick Henry. J.K. Dobbins went 303. Mike Evans, Odell Beckham, Julio Jones, Travis Kelce all went after. CeeDee Lamb went 309 right before DK Metcalf. It's interesting. And then at the 312 401 turn, I went Kenny Golladay and Mark Andrews. I feel really good about having, maybe not a number 1 receiver, but a guy who can be in that top 10 or 12 conversation. And Mark Andrews, which, was awesome last year. Pair him with Lamar. I'm feeling really good. And then obviously I'll address tight end much later. We both typically like to wait, but and then I went Matt Ryan and Devin Singletary. So Daniel Jones actually went 603, and I'm kind of regretting taking Ryan over Daniel Jones.
Really?
Yeah. Daniel Jones, Jared Goff, Ryan Tannehill, and Matthew Stafford are the 4 quarterbacks that have gone since I took Ryan. But I kind of like having the steady Eddie approach with Matt Ryan. Like, I feel like I'm going to be able to play him for 16 games. I feel like he's going to put up big numbers and be really productive for another 5, 6, 7 years, and I'll be absolutely fine. And then Devin Singletary, who we can kind of talk about as we get into tonight's show, because we're going to talk some winners, we're going to talk some losers, and we're going to talk some question marks, some guy, and kind of get where our heads are at with a lot of these picks, because there is some interesting moves out. We're always assessing what happened in the draft and where we're at and all that good stuff. But I want to dive in and talk about some of these names. But I thought it was a good jumping off point. One more thing before we start the show officially. Andy Dalton is a Dallas Cowboy. Interesting. I mean, obviously, we just spent time talking about Dak and how excited we are with him. I mean, a 1-year deal, so obviously safety is there. Paid him, for a backup, but you're also. So I'll let you go, and then I'll let you know my thoughts, because obviously you're our resident Cowboys fan. Like,
okay,
where is your head at with all this stuff?
Okay, so initially when I saw the news, I was pretty disappointed at the fact that they had spent, as it was reported initially, I thought it was a $7 million contract, but then after reading a little bit deeper, it's only $3 million guaranteed, and then he can earn up to $7 million in incentives, and then later finding out that they're cutting Cooper Rush, who would have been making in the mid $2 million range, who we've never really seen him on the field. We don't know what he is. I mean, if you're going to exchange a backup like Cooper Rush for a guy who's a proven starter in the NFL, who, for all his faults, he's not crappy.
No. Actually, I was listening to a thing about him, and he made the playoffs the first 4 years of his career. Definitely what a reliable guy, and that you put it in the right offense and is pretty serviceable. And I guess my one thing would be, this is a team that is among the 5 or 6 maybe teams that you feel really good about having a legit chance to win the Super Bowl. And if Dak goes down, it's like we're on the same wavelength, right? That's what you're going to say. If Dak goes down, you plug in Andy Dalton,
exactly,
and you keep rolling. And maybe your ceiling's not quite as high, but it's pretty damn close. And with all that talent around him, Andy's can just let the guys do what they got to do and just kind of be the guard that gets him the ball.
I mean, this is probably the first time the Cowboys have had a legitimate backup quarterback since, they had freaking Jason Garrett backing up Troy Aikman, in the early 90s. So
since Tony Romo was a backup.
Yeah. But even Tony Romo, he was an unproven, commodity out of Eastern Illinois. Nobody knew who he had. We only had Bill Parcells' word that he was anything to be in the NFL. So I don't know. It really shows a commitment by Jerry Jones, was kind of surprising, because I still think it was kind of an outlandish pick to take CeeDee Lamb, but I guess they're really going for it. They're giving themselves insurance at quarterback. They've made some decent moves. I mean, we'll see, because they know the windows in the NFL are not very big, and they have a short window right now.
Like, I remember the early 2010s version of the Niners, and everybody's all this team's got a huge window, and look at their quarterback, and that thing closes a lot faster than you expect. So dive in while you can, especially before you're paying these guys but buku bucks, and really go for it, because that's how you end up with these rings. And look at what Kansas City did. Look what Seattle did with Russell Wilson. But anyways, let's dive in. What's up, everybody, and welcome to another Angle of Pursuit podcast, your fantasy football home over at fakepigskin.com. I am your host, Kyle Robert. Follow me on Twitter at NotoriousKRO. It's Greasy Rules 14. It's Mr. Brian Twining. What's up, Brian?
What's up, Kyle? It's only May 6th, and it is hotter than hell out here in California. What the F is going on right now?
I don't know. Today actually up here, it's crazy windy, and my allergies are going wild. So I'm gonna power through this, and I know everybody came here for our hot weather takes, but
Yeah.
but yeah, no, it's West Coast. We get the heat, and then the East Coast still dealing out of snow, and I don't know. But we got a lot to get into. We got some draft winners, we got some losers. But with a fantasy slant, obviously, we want to talk about what's the impact of these picks. How aggressive should we be getting with these players? And I want to start with the Green Bay Packers because I think there's a lot to get into here. And we'll start with Aaron Rodgers. Not only did they just say after last year where Davante Adams, who missed time, and nothing really until Allen Lazard stepped up over the last couple weeks of the season, did they have anything from the receivers? They said, nah, we're all set there. We're good. Then they decided to look at the strong suit of the team, with Aaron Jones, with Jamal Williams, and they go, let's take another running back. So they took AJ Dillon out of Boston College, which I like. AJ Dillon is a nice complimentary piece, but a second round pick on him, it felt a little aggressive. And this was after they using a first round pick on Jordan Love, a quarterback. What are the Packers doing?
I have no epic idea.
I just I see, it seems like they don't truly believe in kind of what their team is and how far they got last year. And obviously they played the Niners in the playoffs. I think the championship, not the championship round. Championship round?
Yeah, it was an NFC championship.
Yeah.
Nobody remembers because they were never in the game. So
right, yeah, because that was a barn burner, blowout from the beginning. I guess initially, let's start with Aaron Rodgers. So obviously, we look at this team, gets the NFC Championship, plays well. A new coach. Okay, let's keep doing what we do well. But in arguably one of the best receiver classes in maybe a decade, maybe 2 decades, they just go over and don't take any of these. Okay, if you want to look at the team and go, okay, Aaron Rodgers on his last legs, he's driving everyone crazy. Let's take Jordan Love, who can be an heir apparent. That's fine. Second round, take some of these guys. I'm gonna pull up the receiver names that they could have had,
man.
KJ Hamler, Antonio Gibson, Antonio Gandy Golden, your boy Donovan People. Take Donovan Peoples-Jones in round 5, round 6. Take KJ Hill. Take a shot on some of these guys, even if you're not going to use high draft capital to go after. But you have Aaron Rodgers, and maybe this will look foolish because they already have a trade lined up for AJ Green or
that something. I highly doubt.
But that's the only way you could rationalize their moves on draft day.
Yeah, the only thing I can think that they're thinking right now is that they feel as if their defense is good enough to get them to the same spot or a similar spot that they were last year. And by kind of taking the ball a little bit out of Aaron Rodgers' hands and just running the ball more, they feel like they're going to have a better chance of winning, which I find to just be an asinine assumption. You have potentially one of the greatest quarterbacks, or just he's just one of the best improvisers we've ever seen in the game, and you're giving him no talent whatsoever on the outside, minus Davante Adams. And his numbers have been declining over the last couple of years, but who's he had to throw to? They took a dinosaur, Jimmy Graham. He is nowhere near the same dude. Got minus Davante Adams, who he's missed multiple games 2 years in a row. In Quadius St. Brown, who Marquez Valdes-Scantling.
I thought EQ St. Brown was going to be so good. I was so wrong.
Dude, Geronimo Allison, who I loved, he's he's gone. They have whipped on everybody.
I do like Allen Lazard. I do think he has potential. And I liked him coming out of Iowa State, and I was pretty shocked to see where he went off the board when it came to the draft. So, but it is nice when you have a guy that you like that to have finally get their shot and they improve. The one thing I will give them credit for, though, is both Aaron Jones and Jamal Williams are expiring deals after the season. And smart teams have learned that you don't actually pay running backs. You just keep stockpiling them. And we saw Jamal Williams miss time last year. Obviously, Aaron Jones was incredible and broke out. And, I'm working on my projections right now. And I think another big season is absolutely coming for Aaron Jones. So I get the A.J. Dillon drafting there, pay the running backs as little as possible, have as many options as you can possibly have. It's going to be frustrating for us fantasy owners, but in terms of what they could be, I do think that makes sense. But the lack of getting weapons for Rodgers, I think, is the biggest downfall.
Yeah, I mean, I almost feel like they're wasting this guy's career. And going back to my Dallas Cowboys and Tony Romo, like at the beginning of his career, he wasn't really surrounded with the kind of weapons or like complementary pieces to help him win either. And then only towards the back end of his career did they start to kind of build around him. And we're seeing the opposite with Green Bay. It's almost like when Rodgers first came into the league, Jordy Nelson was kind of coming up. You had all these young guys on the outside. Greg Jennings, he was outstanding.
Yeah.
Jermichael
they had a
Finley.
nice little run where he had two like top 20 fantasy weapons with Jennings and Jordy Nelson for a while, and then they're like, he's so good. Let's just never replace him. Let's just never do anything about it. And even at tight end, like I never understood the Jimmy Graham signing, but Mercedes Lewis is their starting tight end with like Jay Sternberger. Like, I
don't sleep on the Sternberger.
I'll be asleep. Packers not using tight ends is death taxes and Packers.
I mean, I did see somebody on Twitter. I apologize that I'm not crediting the proper person, but I don't remember who was tweeting about it. But they were saying how Matt LaFleur has a history with San Francisco and that kind of offense. And so they were looking at the draft pick of the fullback guy that they took as kind of implementing him in the Kyle Juszczyk kind of role. So, I mean, if they're looking at going more I formation and throwing more to guys out of the backfield, I mean, that's kind of the writing on the wall that we're probably seeing Aaron Rodgers' fantasy relevance continue to disappear.
If I set the over-under at 0.5 of teams that Aaron Rodgers plays for, not named the Green Bay Packers, are you taking the over or the under? Over. So
he's too competitive.
In 2 years, is he? So here's my initial leans. San Francisco, they finally right the wrong if Jimmy G has a struggling season, but Rodgers is also one of those guys that's like you mentioned, he's really competitive, but he's also like kind of, I don't want to say a dick, but
he seems like he'd be vindictive.
Right. And so like, would he even, no matter how much the Niners are willing to throw at him, no matter what the situation, go, you guys passed on me 10 years ago. I'm not going to come to you no matter how many people, how much money you give me. That's my only hesitation there. And we'll see, but yeah, I think we see a Aaron Rodgers to some team like Tom Brady to Tampa.
Yeah, I have been thinking about this the last few days, but how awesome would it be for first Brett Favre to go to a division rival in the Minnesota Vikings, and then Aaron Rodgers to go to Chicago and lead the Bears to the Super Bowl?
I mean, if you want to put a stake in the heart of all Packers nation, go to Chicago, play for the rival.
It's leaning that way with the way Nick Foles' contract is structured, that he can get out of his deal and then say there's an opening and Rodgers is right there.
Yep, and they didn't pick up the 5th-year option Trubisky. Old Mitchell's on his way out, so what a world that would be! That would be
fantastic. Something. That would be fantastic.
But in terms of Aaron Jones, is he a guy that you're just whoever is behind him is going to be the complementary piece, and he's still a guy that you consider kind of in that top 10 among running backs this year?
Yeah, I mean, except for him kind of having a negative touchdown regression, which I mean, he lit it up last year with the amount of times he found the end zone. I don't see that happening. But as far as like the amount of touches and his usage, his field time, like I don't really see that being altered as long as he's healthy. I think the drafting of AJ Dillon affects Jamal Williams a lot more. Just kind of they're going to be using Dillon more as like the bruiser, and maybe we see Aaron Jones see increased opportunities as a receiver with Jamal Williams losing playing time.
Yeah. Like right now, I have Aaron Jones penciled in for 830 yards, 9 touchdowns, another 36 catches for 400 yards. So I'm still tweaking all my projections, but I feel like less than 10 touchdowns is pretty reasonable after last year, and we'll see kind of how this shakes out. I have Aaron Jones getting 180 rush attempts, Jamal Williams getting 85, AJ Dillon getting 50. Pretty fair.
I could see a split like that.
Yeah, so it's always interesting. A team that I want to talk about that we could see a split with, but also could see things get really interesting is Pittsburgh and the Steelers. My dog is losing his mind right now. Sorry, y'all. Let me pause this for a second.
He's telling you, "Let me out, please." You gotta love animals, folks.
The beautiful part of being live on the internet when your
Yes.
dog decides he needs to leave the room. All right, let's talk Steelers. Let's talk Steelers running backs. And this was a team that I think a lot of people had question marks about potentially being a home for one of the DeAndre Swift, Jonathan Taylor, J.K. Dobbins. Obviously, they didn't go that route. They did take a running back. They took where's he? I just had him up. Anthony McFarland.
Booger Jr.
Yeah, Booger from Maryland, a running back that both of us saw quite a bit of during his times with the Terrapins. Obviously, 2 years ago, absolutely destroyed Ohio State. So, is interesting name. Obviously, Benny Snell came on, but is James Conner just like completely getting written off right now and going to be a tremendous value as we start to think about 2020?
Yeah, that's kind of the way it's seeming to me, as the way it's going right now, is that everybody's talking up Booger Jr. We saw Benny Snell get plenty of play last year. He seemed to do okay. Jalen Samuels, like, what is that guy? I mean, he's an H-back. He's not really a running back. Like, I don't even know what the hell position he plays. As far as the best fit for the scheme that they want to run, like, it's just, I think Connor's still a 3-down guy for Pittsburgh, as long as he's fully healthy, which we haven't seen him do. But if Big Ben's back, they're going to want that guy that's the best pass blocker, that fits that little delay running scheme with Roethlisberger out of the shotgun, and I think that's Connor. And I think he's going to be a tremendous value come draft time because people are going to write him off.
Yeah, he had 215 carries 2 years ago in 13 games, 973 yards, 12 touchdowns. I think in general with the Steelers, it's really hard to kind of take anything that happened last year and kind of use it as a jumping off point. If you're going to say, Juju's not going to be very good because of last year, like, you can't compare having a usable quarterback to having Rudolph and Duck Hodges and the train wreck that they had at the position. Even if it's Rudolph for the whole season, just having that consistency, having that reliability, and kind of building your offense to have one guy and then have that completely go out the window after a week. It's a lot on all of the teams. So it will be interesting. I think, like, right now, I think Big Ben, I'm trying to pencil him in as the starter. And if he comes back, I expect a big season out of him. Like, right now, I have him projected for 4,500 yards and 30 touchdowns, which feels really good. But yeah, I mean, so Benny, I think Benny's like, and I've read some stuff that like McFarland's supposed to take over on some of the first and second down work. Benny Snell, obviously, I think he'll get touches, but I think this is a situation where, Mike Tomlin uses one running back. He doesn't use 10 different guys. And once again, I think last year was anomaly. This year is, back to normal. And I think if James Conner can handle it, 200 touches is coming his way.
Oh yeah, no, I think that's pretty much almost a guarantee. If Roethlisberger's healthy and Connor is healthy, I think we see the Steelers play that a style that more resembles what they did in 2018, and we see them get back into the playoff hunt again. Because I mean, last year they saw, as you mentioned, Rudolph and Duck Hodges at quarterback, and they were still towards the end of the season still vying for a playoff spot. So this team is good. They just need the players in the right spots to be able to lead them. And Roethlisberger and Connor are their best two at the positions.
Yeah, and I'm really curious to see who steps up. Obviously we're talking draft winners and losers, but in terms of Steelers, like I want to see who steps up opposite Juju. Is it Deontay Johnson? Is it James Washington? Is it a combination? I think there's going to be potential if Roethlisberger comes back and the offense returns to form for one of those guys to really take a step forward and be borderline wide receiver 2-3 type receiver this year. Right now I have Deontay Johnson as that guy, but as the off season kind of rolls along and we see what the offense may look like and how healthy Big Ben may be, we'll kind of see how that rolls. Welcome again to the Angle of Pursuit podcast. If you're joining us live on YouTube, thank you for hanging out. Drop some questions in the chat. We're always down to any players you want us to hit on. Make sure we get in this conversation because there is a lot. We got some names, but if you have someone you want specifics on, let us know. Thank you for joining us. As always, we are on Spotify and iTunes and whatever if you happen to miss the show, or you can go back to Yahoo or YouTube and check it out. Let's keep our conversation rolling and let's talk about Ronald Jones, a guy that
poor Rojo.
Much like the Steelers, a lot of people thought Jonathan Taylor, J.K. Dobbins, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, one of those type of guys in round 2 was going to end up there, and that was not the case. They did take Keyshawn Vaughn, a guy that a lot of people are getting really excited about, a guy that 2018 tape looks really good, 2019 tape not as great, but that offense was such a mess. I don't know. It really is interesting with some of these guys to kind of, watch. You have to really understand what's going on with the team at the time, or else you're going to watch just a couple games, not see a whole lot, and completely write them off, and then they come to the NFL and they totally pop and do really well. But I still feel like Ronald Jones is the guy to own in this offense. And obviously, we'll talk the Tom Brady angle and how is used pass catching running backs, which Keyshawn Vaughn can absolutely be. But I think Ronald Jones' touchdown upside is double digits. I think if this offense clicks like it has the potential to do, Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, Rob Gronkowski, like
Tyler Johnson. Don't forget about the rookie out of Minnesota.
Oh yeah.
He could have a good year.
Yeah, and I feel like he's more of a dynasty guy than a redraft guy. But I think he is an idea that if they want to eventually replace Mike Evans, or if they want to, just have more depth at the position, if they have to deal with an injury, he is a guy that I like a lot and could really step out. He's kind of in that weird thing though, because the receiver that played opposite him during his time at Minnesota is going to be a first-round pick next year, and a guy that a lot of scouts and fantasy owners should be paying attention to. But kind of gets a little bit of benefit there. But yeah, I'm with you. I think he is a really interesting name. But in terms of Ronald Jones, like, is this going to be a guy that you think you can get on board with and be the fantasy? I mean, are we going back to the well just one more time?
I mean, it's been 2 years in a row now that I've been tooting the horn of Ronald. So, all the talk is about Keyshawn. It's hard for me to envision a rookie running back coming in and just supplanting a guy who had a full season under Arians. You got to remember he's going to be playing with a veteran like Tom Brady, who his main priority is going to be a guy who knows the playbook. And dependent on if Brady tries to adapt to what Arians is presenting or vice versa, and they try to implement some of Brady's concepts, it's more likely that a guy like Rojo, who's been in the league 2 years, is going to have familiarity with some of that as opposed to the rookie. And I could see Rojo kind of taking on that goal line work as well, which would lead more to, touchdown upside as opposed to the 20-20 work of, those quick passes out of the backfield and stuff like that. So I think fantasy upside, I would definitely lean Rojo, but that's not saying that Vaughn isn't going to make a big impact as well. So
yeah,
I think they kind of hinder each other with how good they could actually produce in the fantasy world.
Yeah, and like Keyshawn Vaughn, if he can be a decent pass blocker, that will allow him to stay on the field. And if they want to use the up-tempo offense and move up and down, but if he's not blocking for Brady, he's going to be out of the game quick.
Oh yeah.
The one thing I will say about Rojo is, like, 2 years ago, he had 23 carries in 9 games, averaged less than 2 yards a carry. Like, it was just an absolute mess rookie season. He parlayed that into 172 touches, 724 yards, and 6 touchdowns. If he can take another step in year 3, this could be a guy that approaches 1,000 yards, that approaches double-digit touchdowns, and becomes an absolute steal. So, yeah, I'm going back to the well one more time. I may get burned, but I feel like his draft day cost.
I was just gonna say we're not drafting him as a high end RB2 anyways.
Right.
Like he's gonna be super low end RB2, like more in the RB3 range. So you're getting tremendous value if he's anything close to what we're thinking is going to happen there in Tampa.
Yeah. I mean, as a weight on RB guy, he's going to be a perfect target for me as a guy with tremendous upside, low draft day price. And if he fails, then I cut him and I move on and I find my next guy. I find another running back. But I've been a fan of this guy since he came out of SC. I still think there's a lot there. They obviously used a 2nd round pick. I still think he'll come around. Speaking of coming around, let's talk to Mr. Drew Lock, a guy that his rookie season, we saw flashes, stuff that you can get excited about, stuff you can be optimistic about. But clearly Denver sees him as the guy they want to build around, because they went out in the draft and they added Jerry Jeudy. They added KJ Hamler. This is on the heels of obviously having Courtland Sutton, who emerged in a big way. They had Noah Fant last year as their first overall pick. They brought in Melvin Gordon during the offseason. He has the weapons. He has the targets. The offensive line has to be better. But as the official Denver Broncos fan club podcast, we have to get behind this team, right?
Oh, man. I would even go so far as to argue that the Denver Broncos, if everybody kind of works out with the way that we are kind of envisioning with how good these rookies are going to be, that they have the best offensive weapons surrounding their quarterback in the AFC West. I mean, this is even ahead of the Chiefs with Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce, and then whatever the hell they're doing at running back with Clyde Edwards-Helaire and Damian Williams. I mean, Denver has loaded up the cannons for Drew Lock. And, I think the ceiling is the sky, or the sky is the ceiling, whatever MJ said.
The ceiling is the roof.
Yeah, there you go. The ceiling is the roof for Denver. I think we see a huge uptick in production out of this offense this year.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, we're going to need to see a little more consistency, but Drew Lock got his feet wet during his rookie season. Didn't have any major, getting crushed, so many sacks that his confidence is rattled. He got his feet wet. He gets a full off season to prep. Obviously, the quarantine isn't ideal, but this feels like a dynasty team that we're talking about in 2 or 3 years as a team that is a dynamic offense, features 2 top 20 receivers, features a top 6-ish quarterback, and is a playoff contender with, more upside depending on how strong their defense is.
I don't want to go so far as to say this, but I'm going to do it anyways. I mean,
do it.
It's looking so similar to the era of when they had Elway. I mean, minus Melvin Gordon doesn't add up to TD, and then you had Ed McCaffrey on the outside, who kind of looks like Courtland Sutton. He's that big guy, big body people up. And then you got Jerry Jeudy, who could be that Rod Smith on the outside. And then you got Noah Fant, who could wind up being like a Shannon Sharp in the middle, just a big athletic dude that can get down the field. I mean, this Broncos team is on the way. I think
you got people in Denver just foaming at the mouth right now. They're just so excited for football season.
I mean,
Yeah.
I think the big question mark though for us is Melvin Gordon. Like, what are we going to see out of this backfield?
That's my concern, and my concern is like if they're Melvin Gordon might be great for fantasy, but that might be bad for this offense. That might be a little too many touches, a little too much, running into the pile, falling down. I think he is still a viable pass catcher. I have him projected for like 70 targets this year. He could catch close to 50 balls, which would be amazing. But I'm really curious to see kind of how the offense looks. Is it Melvin Gordon 60, Philip Lindsay 30, and then the rest of the guys, kind of getting whatever's left? Is it 50-50, 49-49, and change going to Royce Freeman? That's my big question. I really want to see like Cecil Lammey of Football Guys. I think is going to be a great resource, obviously in Denver, has a lot of good nuggets on this Broncos team, but we got to see something out of the training camp to have a comfortable understanding. But they obviously paid Melvin Gordon to bring him in. I have a hard time envisioning him not getting at least a good chunk of the touches, which might be good for the short term and actually bad for the long term. But we'll see. We'll see how this works. And I'm kind of excited about this offense. But yeah, Drew Lock has to step up, and if Drew Lock steps up, the ceiling is the roof, and they can absolutely take off. They have the weapons to do it.
I'd be jumping on that on their total wins over right now because it's gonna continue to creep up.
Yeah, I think. But it's and we'll talk more win totals. Obviously, we went through that whole rigmarole, but as we'll see what the season is, and how much that number is. And I'm curious to see if they decide to play 12 games instead of 17 or 16. Do they just refund bets and then repost numbers? I don't know. So that will be interesting.
Before we transition out of the Broncos here, we had a question from 49er Sean, which it pertains to Melvin Gordon and his former team, the Chargers, with Austin Eckler. Who do you think, Kyle, is the better bet in redraft this year in a PPR league, Austin Eckler or Melvin Gordon? Especially with the news coming out of San Diego, they're not LA, San Diego, that Justin Jackson and Josh Kelly are going to be also involved in the running game for the Chargers.
Yeah, and see, I don't honestly, if I'm an Austin Eckler fan, Austin Eckler owner, I like that sound because last year we saw him get so many touches and so many carries and then got injured, right? So if they can supplant, a few of those between the tackles runs and take some of the wear and tear off, Austin Eckler is absolutely the guy. I feel better about his floor, especially in this offense where if it's Tyrod or if it's, Justin Herbert with the check down to the running back, like I just see a ton of catches, and I feel like it's a lot more murky in Denver with Gordon, with Philip Lindsay. For me, I think he also mentioned James Conner, and I think Eckler is clearly one. I think the question is who's number two, because I think James Conner has the upside to be a top 5 running back, but Melvin Gordon might also offer a lot more safety that you're just not going to get from James Conner because he could go into the back, be on the bench a little bit, and it's a lot of Benny Snell and McFarland and Jalen Samuel. So if you had to pick between those two guys in the PPR league, where are you going?
So for me, I hate saying this, but I would actually lean Melvin Gordon over both those guys. Just kind of, yeah. I mean, okay, so just kind of like how you alluded to, like they didn't sign him to. I don't think they signed him to that contract to come in and share the load with Philip Lindsay. Like I feel like John always sees him as being their bell cow, like very similar to what TD offered them. Just a guy that they could just hand the rock 20 times a game and just milk the clock, get him big chunk plays. I mean, they've obviously been able to do it with Philip Lindsay and Royce Freeman. So and Gordon offers so much more receiving potential than a Royce Freeman. So I think we see more of like a 60-30 with Melvin Gordon seeing more opportunities, and with the weapons that he's going to have on the outside. Like, I think that is going to present less stacked boxes against them. Whereas, kind of like how I've been saying with the Chargers, like, I really see them going really heavy I formation, 2 tight end sets. You're going to have a lot of RPO action. I mean, we're going to see a lot of short passes to the tight ends, to Keenan Allen.
In the first quarter, and then they get blown out, and then it's all Austin Eckler checkdowns as they're trailing 30-3 in the third quarter with like 15 minutes to go.
I mean, I'm not gonna. It's hard for me to base a player on a team's losing success. Like, if we're looking at the Chargers staying in games, it's going to be them milking the clock, limiting plays by the other team, which means by them limiting plays by themselves. Like, they're probably going to be near the bottom of the NFL in total plays per game, and I'd prefer to stay away from an offense like that.
Fair. Let's keep the running back talk going, and let's head to Baltimore. I think if you're not named Mark Ingram and you're in this backfield, you're a big loser. Not literally, but they took J.K. Dobbins, and I'll stand on my soapbox and preach about J.K. as the 101, the feature running back in Baltimore starting as early as next season. Gus Edwards is $750,000. His contract is done at the end of the year. Justice Hill is the guy that I think is still. I think there may be potential there as a complement to Dobbins, but yeah, I think between the evolution of the passing game a little bit, more JK and Lamar obviously doing his thing. If you hold, I paid a lot to get Justice Hill. He was the guy I was excited about. Gus Edwards have him on a couple teams, and I feel like unfortunately those guys are marginal assets at best.
Yeah, Justice Hill to me, just kind of with the drafting of J.K. Dobbins, like, I think Baltimore is kind of telling us that they don't really see him as somebody that they're going to give the ball multiple times a game. Like, he's more of like a gimmick player. Like, he's going to touch the ball maybe a couple times out of, trick plays. He's like a Lance Dunbar for the Cowboys back in the day, where you
love your Lance Dunbar comp. I love it. It's my favorite.
I mean, you just think, like, I could see him running those little like jet sweeps where he throws it back to Lamar Jackson, and then Jackson chucks it deep to Hollywood Brown. So, I think Justice Hill's value has just hit rock bottom. I mean, if you could get him for super cheap, I think he's somebody you could stash in case somebody were to get injured. But
if he's on a waiver wire, you can use like a 4th round draft pick for him. Like, I'm okay there. But yeah, as we get another question in our chat, it's J.K. Dobbins, and it's not relatively close.
No.
Like, J.K. Dobbins is like, I don't know, a top 20, top 30 fantasy asset. I mentioned him in that Superflex startup. He went 309. So in a non-Superflex, he's probably going late second, maybe early third. I personally traded Mike Evans for him straight up, and that's where my head's at.
I mean, I'll give you credit because maybe credit where credit's due.
Yeah, maybe it's a tad bit aggressive. I had some receiver depth, and I was able to add Jalen Reagor and T. Higgins, so my receivers should be fine now. But
the talk I've been seeing all over social media, like, the J.K. Dobbins love is reaching a fever pitch right now. Like, multiple people are jumping on the wagon, as he could potentially wind up being even possibly more valuable than Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I mean, as a 3-down guy for the Ravens, who led the NFL in rushing attack and rushing attempts over the last season, well, I don't see that changing at all.
Yeah.
With the foreseeable future. Mark Ingram's contract is expiring, and if he steps into the similar role, I mean, he's clearly the best option of those two, and possibly even better than a Jonathan Taylor or a DeAndre Swift I've seen people talking about. So,
well, let's dive into Jonathan Taylor talk, because obviously the Indianapolis Colts took him. Marla Mack had over 1,000 yards, had 8 touchdowns in only 14 games last year. He is entering the final year of his deal, and like I mentioned with Green Bay. Smart teams stay smart for a reason, and they know that running backs are assets. You don't overpay. John Robinson, don't pay Derrick Henry. So
Ezekiel
hopefully
Elliott.
smart. Hopefully, yeah. Well, I feel like there's Zeke and Christian McCaffrey, and then there's everyone else. And I don't think Derrick Henry, like you could be down 20 points. You can keep Zeke or Christian McCaffrey in the offense, and they can still be super useful.
Derrick Henry is LeGarrette Blount 2.0.
I think he's better than that. But
he's a leveled up LeGarrette Blount.
He's basic. Yeah. Well, at least he didn't say he's a leveled up Lance Dunbar. That would have been. But they were able to take him out of the playoff game against the Chiefs, and you're not doing that with McCaffrey. You're not doing that with Zeke. So, and Saquon's in the same boat. So, but anyway, so Marla Mack. I guess, do we expect him to be a guy they try and use and abuse for the final year of his deal, and know that they have Jonathan Taylor going forward, and basically it starts with Mack getting most of the work, and as the season goes along, it gets a little closer, and then by the end, they're using Jonathan Taylor as their feature guy with Mack kind of fading into the background, or do you think he's a guy that maybe gets ousted before the end of the season? They just let JT, hit the ground running. Where are you at with this backfield?
I could see them starting with an even split between those two guys. I mean, Jonathan Taylor, going into the draft, I wasn't shy about saying I thought he was the best pure runner in the class, and he showed it. He is a traditional bell cow running back that could tilt the rock the entire game, as he saw almost 300 carries every year at Wisconsin. So he's proven to be able to carry the ball multiple times.
Right.
I think they're going to share the load immediately, and it's going to be kind of a hot hand situation early on, with the likelihood of Taylor kind of taking over as the better pure runner, and Mack kind of spelling him throughout the game, and Nyheim Hines filling in for those passing down or when they're losing. At least for year one.
For sure. And I kind of wonder how this offense looks in general. Obviously, they're going to do what they can do to keep Phillip Rivers upright, to keep him healthy, to avoid him taking too many shots. And if that means running the ball more than especially because, I love Michael Pittman, T.Y. Hilton's still there, but if they limit his throws just a little bit and run it a little bit more, it could be interesting. I do wonder who the pass catcher is, because obviously, Mack isn't really a pass catcher. His biggest season is 20 catches. I wonder if they give Jonathan Taylor a chance to kind of prove that he can be that guy. If not, we'll see kind of what they do on third downs. But behind that offensive line, there's a lot to like. It's just I could see a situation where Marlon Mack, it's all the work and it's kind of, they build him up, or a situation where they just oust him right away because Jonathan Taylor's so good. The whole quarantine thing is really throwing a wrench, because I think if he comes into mini camp, rookie camp, looks amazing, they can make the decision a lot quicker.
Well, this is kind of like especially this situation in particular. I love Taylor in Dynasty, but as far as redraft goes, he's not really somebody that I'm going to have too many shares of, because, most people are probably going to be taking him as their RB2, which I think is way too early for a guy that we have no idea how they're going to, deploy their backfield rotation. So I think you could get Mack at a good price. If we stay in this quarantine thing all the way up until when football starts, I don't think they're just going to hand the reins to Taylor, being a guy that hasn't been able to get on the field with the team.
Let's talk one more player, and I'm going to kind of use one more question from our chat as kind of the jumping off point before we get out of here. Leonard Fournette, is he a winner because the Jags didn't really address running back? Is he a loser because they didn't pick up his fifth year option, and he kind of seems to be like a guy that I know they've obviously talked to teams about potentially trading as we head into 2020? Is he going to be somebody that we'll be excited about for fantasy, Or is he going to be a guy that there's going to be so many question marks, or maybe going into a new situation that we're just not going to feel that great about him? Because I've never been a huge fan, but this could be an ultimate opportunity for him just to get buckets of work, run until his wheels fall off, and he becomes a guy that, for this year at least, number one running back in all of fantasy.
Yeah, so I wouldn't go that far, but just a couple things on Fournette. Like I know they signed Thompson. He's probably going to see more of the receiving down duties and Fournette's going to lose a lot of those touches that he had last year. I mean, he had over 70 catches. I think we see him get more towards the 40-50 range, but he's going to score more touchdowns than he did last year. He had two or three the entire season.
Positive regression.
Oh yeah, that's definitely happening. And we're seeing a player who he had his team who drafted him decline his 5th-year option, so he's got to be out to prove something. He's going to be a free agent. He can't play like crap because he knows in order for him to make money, he's got to produce. I heard local radio here was talking about the Mitchell Trubisky situation, and he was mentioning how Chicago did the same thing with cornerback Kyle Fuller, how they declined his 5th-year option, and then Fuller went out and balled out, and then he signed a long-term contract. So we could see a similar thing happen with Fournette, where we see him produce his best season yet, and then Jacksonville re-signs him, being that they didn't address the position.
Yeah. So if we're looking into 2020 and we're thinking about redraft, obviously, if you're doing best ball, if you're doing that kind of stuff, you're thinking about this right now. Is it Leonard Fournette or is it Derrick Henry?
Oh man. I hate Derrick Henry. But I mean, just with this situation, I'd probably lean Henry just with the guaranteed rush, just kind of the style of play we're going to see out of them. But I prefer Fournette, to be honest with you, in a dynasty still.
I think in best ball, it's Derrick Henry, and in redraft, it's probably Derrick Henry. But he's been so slow, boom, goes off.
We've talked about it. He plays half a season. The first half of the year, Derrick Henry does nothing, and then the last 6 games of your fantasy season, he explodes. Yeah,
I'm optimistic that they may have drafted the running back of the future in Tennessee.
Please.
They used the franchise tag on Derrick Henry. They use him a bunch, and he has an incredible year, and we go back to the playoffs. But long term, but yeah, in redraft, it's Derrick Henry. Okay, so as we look to get out of here, we still got a few more minutes, so let's keep this gravy train rolling. Let's head down to Houston. Let's talk about David Johnson.
I'm going to find myself with a lot of David Johnson shares because he's not really being talked about. He's been kind of kicked to the curb. Carlos Hyde was a serviceable option in fantasy last year. Yeah. He produced multiple games of, top 20 running back status. So I think David Johnson's a better runner than Carlos Hyde. He's more athletic. I think he's way better pass catcher. I don't think he's coming. I think we're going to see him play a 3-down role early on in the season. And I mean, again, with a lot of these guys, if he stays healthy, he could return to similar form that we saw early on.
Yeah, and when your receivers are Brandon Cooks, Will Fuller, Kenny Stills, and Randall Cobb, and Kiki Cutie, injuries will be aplenty. So there could be a 60, 70 catch season for David Johnson. Obviously, they still have Duke Johnson. So in terms of his passing upside, that would be my slight hesitation. But I think it really comes down to, can David Johnson stay healthy? If he can get 220 touches, 220 carries, and another 60 or 70 targets, he could be a top 10, top 12 fantasy running back again. If he's just toast and his YPA is much, much lower, we're looking at if he can get back above 4 yards a carry, he'd be awesome. If he's going to be Carlos Hyde and 3.5 yards, he'll probably approach 1,000 yards. He'll be
good.
6 or 7 touchdowns, be a guy you'll want to use most weeks, but you'll never feel great about. But yeah, I'm working on the Texans as we speak, and figuring out that backfield has been a challenge. But obviously, David Johnson's a guy that I think is interesting and obvious, and I'm curious to. I want to do some best ball drafts, Brian. I think it's going to give us a good barometer of kind of where these guys are coming off the board, and maybe that's a good idea for a future show. We can look at some ADP and kind of talk about expectation versus reality. Are these guys really going as low or as high as we expect? What can we really do with them? Where are we drafting them? All that stuff. But the beautiful part is it's May. We're stuck in quarantine, so there's plenty of time for us to run through this, to check it all out. We got a lot of prospects I still want to dive into, so we'll be doing that. We'll obviously be talking win totals. We'll be talking some college football sports betting. Hopefully, fingers crossed.
Please, Lord.
It seems like the wheels are in motion for us to have something come August, come September. What that looks like, we'll see. But it really seems like that's going to be in the cards. But Brian Twining, I am your host, Kyle Robert. Make sure you are following the show on Twitter at FPAOP. Make sure you're following us. Feel free to drop questions, drop show ideas, drop players you want our input on, trades, anything there. And we're here every Wednesday starting at 9 o'clock Eastern, 6 o'clock Pacific. Come hang out, grab a cocktail, grab a beer, hang out
Bring
for an hour.
the heat.
Drop some questions in the old comments. Tell us why we're crazy. Tell us why we're wrong. Tell us why we're the worst, aka be a Dallas Cowboy fan. Anyways, for Brian Twining, I am your host, Kyle Robert. We will talk to you guys next time.